And then we're going to kind of ad lib. Hey, everybody, we're getting started right here at noon. My name is Mike Black. Welcome to our latest in our Page Black leadership series, and it is Managing Innovation in the Middle Market. My guest, let me hit the right button. My guest today, Benny Carrion, Sean Dakin, Tom Strambu. Benny, so I'm going to start with Benny. Benny is the founder of the Velocity Technology Group. He's deeply interested in discovering and implementing the most useful and advanced telecommunications and technologies available to companies today. That's a mouthful, but every time I talk to Benny, I walk away with a new idea about how to automate something in my company. Whether or not it's feasible, I don't know, but I definitely have awesome ideas and definitely some feasible ones as well. Next, we have Sean. Sean explores and implements solutions for companies in their most pressing challenges. I refer to him as a solo think tank. I think he's incredibly smart, and I also benefit from all of my conversations with him. He advises nonprofits and startups, including the Accelerating Studies Foundation, Foresight Education Research Network, and the Lifeboat Foundation. I don't know that last one, so I'll have to have a conversation about that. All right, then we have Tom Strambu, and he's a senior strategy consultant for Voxel Revolution Consulting. And so he's the founder of Voxel Revolution Consulting, and it's a technology consultancy focusing on augmented and virtual reality. Augmented reality is when maybe you have a headset. Maybe not everybody knows that. You have a headset and it's kind of projecting some kind of virtual reality in front of you. So maybe it's giving you a heads-up display on some of the work you're doing. Tom, tell me if I'm wrong, because I could be. But also virtual reality, and his self-styled pragmatic approach to consulting cuts through the jargon. He speaks plainly about the benefits and challenges of digital transformation. So who actually speaks plainly about digital transformation in this world? Absolutely no one. All right, my name is Mike Black, other than Tom Strambu. My name is Mike Black. I'm the CEO and managing partner of Page Black. I'm your host today, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation. Out there in the world of audience, if you're not AFK, do a quick intro, and we'll see if it comes through. We were having some tech problems where we had a bunch of people talking, and we couldn't see you, and I apologize if that's happening today. All right, so in terms of Page Black, we are interested in taking on your difficult marketing challenges. So some of the things that looks like are you've tried everything, but you aren't seeing the desired results. You know you're better than your competition, but you don't know why they get more attention. That one's come up a lot lately. Marketing's not happening. It's just not consistent, not measured. Maybe it's not working at all. Your customers don't know everything that your company offers. And that's a foreshadow. That's our topic of our webinar coming up, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then finally, you need to expand into target market. So maybe you're trying to target new people, new types of companies, or new geography, but you don't have a plan. So those are all things we'll help you with. If you're interested, give us a call. All right, so moving into my panel and my first William Shatner-oriented question. It's coming in staggered here. Panel, I'll pull you on in a second. The question for you to consider is, how should business leaders in the middle market think about innovation and technology? Let's get our panel on here. And Sean, what do you think? Middle market companies, what are the things they should be thinking about when it comes to technology and innovation?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of different layers to it, right? So, first question is, how do we define middle market, and what do you mean by innovation? So let's just assume that middle market is, 50 million to $1 billion in revenue, top line, and innovation implies that you're creating sort of novel value propositions for either existing customers or net new customer segments. I guess the way I think about it is, if middle market organizations don't have a focus on innovation, however they define it, but ideally the way I just defined it, then they're not going to be around in 5 years or 10 years. I think it's not just a nice to have; it's a critical component of business today, right? And so I think what that means is, you have to have support for at all levels, the ability to kind of deal with uncertainty. Be able to test new ideas and embrace this notion of failing in order to learn, and having learning be your increment of progress as an organization. So I'll stop there.
All right, very good. So I guess my question, so I had a guest on 2 weeks ago, and one of the things he said is there's a little bit of, I think he used the word vapor, where some of these larger firms talk about digital transformation, which is a piece of what you're talking about.
Sure.
And there's this picture, they paint a picture of that you're going to be out of business if you're not looking at this. And I tend to agree with that, but not his perspective, that it is important. But it seems like the risk and the timeline that is being talked about is fast. Like that's that's really fast, that it's really got to be this huge priority or you're gone tomorrow. You say 5 to 10 years. Is that realistic from your perspective? You're deep into this, so I think you're the guy to ask this question to.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it depends on your market, right? So, a $50 million Midwestern manufacturing organization is going to have different opportunities and challenges than a $500 million regional healthcare provider, right? So, both of those being middle market organizations, but the reality is that between AI, automation, analytics, some of the stuff that Benny and Tom focus on, I don't see organizations surviving. I mean, I think if you look at the survival function of mid-market organizations over the last 20 years, you see that longevity is shrinking, right? And that's not just true of the mid-market, but it's true of large enterprises and companies on publicly traded markets. So I think this is just a critical thing, and I think it's not slowing down, right? It's getting faster, right? So, and digital transformation by definition is actually human transformation, right? It's a cultural mindset shift, and actually starts with people, and not technology.
I agree with that. And so when you say longevity, and I'll shift into to the other guests in just a second, what I'm hearing you say is really kind of the lifespan of your business model is shrinking. Whatever you do today, you will not be doing in 5 years, or it will certainly have changed drastically. And that change is your company has to begin to be more agile and adapt to those kinds of changes. Is that what you meant?
Yes, absolutely. And again, I think if this is not already abundantly clear to leaders in mid-market organizations, they are way behind the curve. Yeah. That's
fair. Yeah, and I think as we see all the automation, sorry, I can go on and on about this. Tom, coming from with the AR and then the augmented reality and virtual reality, or just digital transformation experience, what's your response or thoughts on that?
So I think right off the top, I think it's important to kind of define our terms a little bit here. So if we're talking about digital transformation, that is quite a unique thing to innovation. It is quite possible to view innovation completely without technology at all. We've got multiple types of innovation. We've got process innovation and we've got product innovation. And if your challenge is, think big here. If your challenge is to reduce road deaths, an innovation that came up for that was the paintings on the road, right? So as you approach a curve, what they did was they found out that if you paint stripes on the road, and then as the curve approaches, you get those stripes closer together, people feel like they're going faster. So they instinctively slow down. Mm-hmm. Well, this isn't technology at all. This is behavioral economics, right? And we're talking about an innovation that takes psychology into consideration. So if I've got on the other end of this video chat a manager, I think we would be doing ourselves a disservice to only be talking about technology in terms of how to innovate. And you really lose a lot if all you're thinking about is what's the next gadget I could get in the door to be innovative. It's actually, I think that's a common sickness of the innovative manager, is thinking, God, where's the next thing that I can buy that is going to make us great?
So you're doubling down on the theme Sean brought up around it's people first, and thinking through as how is it people interact with their environment, and that's really key.
I double down and go further to say that for me, innovation is a cultural attribute. Mm-hmm. That within your organization, if you don't have a culture that is prepared for innovation, then it doesn't matter what gadget you bring in the door, you're not going to find success. You need to have attributes such as embracing failure, or rather, nobody likes to fail. If you can get your organization to consider failure as an element of iteration, then you're in a far better situation. Like we didn't fail permanently, we just failed this time, and now we know more about getting on to the next one. So there's a lot of things that I think we should be getting into over the course of this call about what does a company look like that embraces innovation? What are the key features that allow for success? But Sean hit it right on the head, is that it's a people problem. It's not a technology problem.
Mike, can I chime in on that?
Yeah.
So, Tom, I think it's a great example, and your example about the lines on the road is so spot on. I mean, ultimately, this is about challenging assumptions and trying to understand, where you want to be and how best to get there. And in your example is a social engineering psychology innovation that has little to do with technology. But social engineering innovation is to some degree it's a social technology, if you will, or at least it's used in that way. But I think about it more broadly, and it is so much about again a human challenge, about mindset shifts, about thinking about a problem in a more holistic way, and often it's not reductive, right? It's integrative, and it is you often innovate to take away as opposed to add. So rather than adding a new technology or a new gadget, as you said, it's equally likely that you can innovate to get where you want to go by reduction.
All right, very good. So Absolutely. Benny, you own a technology group. These guys are trashing technology, saying that is not the point here. The gauntlet is thrown down. And folks, I told them to disagree, and they keep agreeing with each other. So just a note, they're failing me miserably in that. Benny, it's on you. What's your response to all of this stuff you're hearing?
Well, actually, I'm going to say, you're not going to like this, Mike, but I do agree with that. Throwing technology for technology's sake for the idea of chasing innovation, I think that's a bad idea. You have to take a look at the overall picture, and Tom and Sean really made some good points in terms of it being cultural and really taking at the infrastructure, the bones of what your business is. Take a look at the biggest thing that we had here in 2020, right? With COVID, everybody had to change their business model. Everybody had to modify that some capacity. And for those who thought that they could just keep doing what they were doing and be able to have the success, well, if your business model didn't work in alignment with how COVID had us not out there in the world, how we had to have everyone working from home or anything along those lines, how did you fare? I mean, how are you going to fare going forward? Part of all the entrails of what happens after the fact is, now that, if you will, we're kind of I won't say that we're done with COVID, because we're certainly not, but as we move into a more relaxed time period, how has work culture changed? How has your company changed? And if you take a look in terms of how you've done well, did you have to reduce? Did you increase? Were you able to keep up with capacity? Those are the things that you take a look at. And if at that point it makes sense to introduce technology into it, then that's the time to be able to do it. Don't do innovation just simply because there's that bright, shiny object out there. I've seen business owners kind of chase that too as well. That's not necessarily the best course of action.
That's 100% true. And I was actually on a call with a CEO of a marketing firm, and we were just chatting this morning, and that's a 100-person firm. They're booming. And her comment, and I agree with this 100%, is that we're not going back to the old normal. There is no going back. And I think what really stands out to me is if you run a company today and you look at the change that happened in 2020, in like 3 months, we adopted like 13 years or something of technology was the measurement, right? And so if you think that we're going to go back, people learned how to adapt quickly, and if they haven't lost that skill. And so if you're not thinking about how you run your company in that way, as my comment, then you should be. And so there's that.
I'm gonna agree and disagree, Mike.
Okay, good. Finally, somebody disagrees with me.
Finally. So I agree with everything you said, but and it's funny. In a prior role, I led a team focused on emerging enterprise technologies, right? And when COVID hit, we were talking, with our stakeholders and amongst our team as, what are all these changes? What are the ripple effects associated with this? What are the downstream impacts? And I challenged my team to think about those things, of course, but also to think about what isn't changing, right? And are there opportunities for innovation in what's not changing? So I think of it, there's a model called pace layering. So layers of change and change in different domains happens at different, on different schedules, if you will. So technology obviously changes very quickly. Business models tend to follow that a little bit less quickly. Infrastructure, governance, values, culture, things like that, right? Those change much less frequently or at a slower pace. So thinking about what is it that, from a human condition perspective, is not changing, and all these other things around us are changing, what does that mean, right? What are the implications? What are the assumptions that we need to challenge because of that?
All right, so give me a little bit more. That's brilliant. And if you didn't believe me that he's a solo think tank by himself, now you should. So what were some conclusions you guys drew?
Oh, we had no answers, only questions.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so, but there was brilliant lead up. No, my thought, what really struck me is that we, and Tom and I have talked about this on another level, we as people are weird. We do not evolve as quickly as the technology is changing so much faster than we do. We change very, very slowly over a period of time. So all the things that we were afraid of 200 years ago, all the things around survival, all that still exists in our brains, right?
200,000 years ago. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. We're
right.
Yeah. We're still on the savannah. We just don't live in that, in that environment anymore.
There you go. Or we think we don't. Depends until there's a hurricane. That's a whole other discussion. Tom, you took a breath. What are you going to say there?
Yeah, I did. I'd like to hop in on this. So I think it would be very difficult for us today to come up with something novel and original on the topic of innovation, like in terms of advice of how to establish an innovative methodology. Why is that? Is because there's dozens, more than dozens of methodologies in existence. If you are looking for process or product innovation, if you're looking for process information, go with a Six Sigma lean methodology. If you're looking for product innovation, go for design thinking. There's books, classes. I mean, there's everything that you could want for your organization to teach them what steps you need and what roles need to be filled in order to have environments where these micro innovations, this kind of, we're not talking about a paradigm shift in your company. We're talking about process improvements on a continuous basis. All of those are innovations. They're just evolutionary, not revolutionary, right? So I don't think that we should be focusing on that today as much as kind of pointing people to the ones that we really like a lot. I think what's probably a place to dig out some value is what we all understand on this call, because we've been through the process, is where are you going to fail, right? You get all of the great books about Six Sigma. You get design thinking classes and you feel like you've got the black belt. What's the first thing that's going to go wrong? And I think that's something that they don't always teach in the class. Often that's because it's unique to every situation. But I think the answer that's underlying that, of course, is almost always, at least in my experience, about 90% of the time, it's people.
All right. Well, I'm going to pause you. I'm going to pause you there just because we actually have two questions. One, I'm going to challenge you guys to give them some advice, and maybe that is pointing them in a direction, and maybe it's not. We'll see. But the third question we're getting into is what goes wrong, and so we'll get to that in just a second. Before we go there, I am going to pop out and just say quickly, if you are on this and would appreciate learning more about marketing, we have a webinar coming up on July 13th. That's 10 a.m. Mountain, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. And we're going to talk about if you need to educate your customers about everything that you do. Maybe they know a little bit about what you do, but there are a ton of other things you do that could help them. We're going to tell you how to build a customer journey and make that happen. So thank you, Tom, for that. And then I'm supposed to put the next question up, and I forgot. So let me pop back out to the next question. And so this is a fear-based question. We're supposed to get people engaged with it. And it is, what are large companies doing with innovation? And is this a threat to small and medium-sized companies? And so there's this kind of, when I think about this in my head, what I think of is the idea that large businesses, I think, move very slowly in general. That's why we see large businesses build kind of incubators or think tank or innovation labs within the company to try and move faster and get away from some of the bureaucracy. Yet there's this big trend. Sean really alluded to this trend of large companies are coming after you. You see larger companies that are buying up smaller companies slowly, and they're in specific industries. It's happening in dental, in doctors' offices. They're all getting bought out by these larger companies and turning into corporate entities and things like that. So that's the trend that I'm seeing. And so my question to you is, what are they doing right now, and what is that a threat? Benny, what are your thoughts? I'll start with you. Since we started with you last, we're going to go with you first. Pressure's on.
I think that it all really depends on the industry, right? And so, like, you made a good point there. And it's funny, my dad's a retired doctor himself. And so at the time he was retiring, he was actually getting pressured into joining a group. He had all these benefits and, freedom and vacation time. And though he was on the tail end of his career, my sister-in-law, who actually, she's a doctor as well, she was on just starting out her career. And so for her, the idea of actually starting up your own practice and doing that and kind of starting from ground zero, those days really are unattractive because no one really goes into medicine to want to be a small business owner. They don't want to go and start their own practices nowadays. And so in that world, the old style small doctors that we kind of romanticized when we were young, what that looks like, those have really gone by the wayside. And so now we're dealing with corporate infrastructure. You may see one doctor for this one and you see a nurse practitioner there. So in and of itself, does the business suffer? Again, I would say it depends on the industry, but yeah, I'm seeing it wherever there's an opportunity to be making money. Large companies, they have the pocketbooks, and if they can justify putting in, acquiring a company and not, having to have them do the innovation, because the smaller the company is, face it, we just have less resources. You have smaller amounts of resources, whether it be groups that you can be a part of. Think of the largest companies out there. If they find an attractive market, even if it's, peripheral to what they're doing, if it makes sense, what the heck, just throw $1 billion at it and see if it sticks.
Yeah, I know it'd be hard for me to fight $1 billion adversary. I guess my thinking is that, the advantage smaller companies and middle-sized companies have, and I think, okay, fine, 500 million relative to these $1 billion companies, is they have fewer people and they have less barrier to being agile as long as they have their stuff together. And a larger company it's harder for them to move, to essentially turn the boat in the night quickly. Sean, my gut says you have an answer to this, so I'm going with you. What are your thoughts? And you can go with the threat or the other way around of, we've kind of shifted that a little bit.
I think it's both. I mean, I think, you look at the platform economy, you look at the as a service model, and you see that smaller organizations can embrace those platforms to get to market quicker and to theoretically compete more effectively locally and globally, right? So that's a plus. The challenge, I think, where the rub comes in is that platform business models, and I mean, I guess you could extrapolate to market economies and maybe, and this is not a critique of capitalism, but it is a critique of capitalism. I am a capitalist, that's okay. But by definition, they're winner take all dynamics, right? It's success to the successful archetype, right? And there's positive feedback loops there. And so, first mover advantage is maybe less important than first platform to 1 million users, or to $1 million in monthly recurring revenue, whatever the metric is, right? Because those platforms are accretive and they dominate over time. And so if you're a mid-market organization and you are trying to compete with a much larger player that can grow both organically and inorganically and throw a lot of resources, to some degree, it doesn't matter how fast they move or how agile they are, right? The dynamics of the system will take over. And so, that's, there's a broader societal or systemic issue there around wealth and income inequality, right? But that's the same thing. It's the exact same process at play. So good and bad.
All right, Tom,
Well,
pressure's on. You got to follow that.
That
You got to
got
follow
big really
that.
fast. Like,
Sorry.
Mike, I don't think I've got a lot to add here. I'll say just a couple things. Is that the MNCs, multinational corporations, global business, are, I think the biggest difference there is that they can afford to grow technology internally, whereas mid-market shouldn't, right? If mid-market is going to be doing anything, they should be building culture and buying technology, whereas MNCs can build technology and work on and buy as well. So the benefit, as you both pointed out, there was these lumbering giants. Something like a shift from Azure to a different server would is a years long process, right? Or certainly at least a year, and a mid-market company should be able to address those challenges and get through that relatively quickly. So in in all of the reasons that you mentioned, I wouldn't view it at all as a deficiency. There's just benefits to being able to move quickly, especially if you're already working on some sort of agile methodology.
All right. So given Sean's, and whenever I leave with Sean, I'm always like more worried about the world because he thinks deeply about these things. And I'm like, wow, I don't even know how to address that. My thought is, as a middle market company, it's really hard. It is hard to compete with these larger companies. Should part of their process be, okay, I'm going to, as I look at my SWOT and I look at my analytics around where I'm taking the company, should they be looking at where is it not profitable for these large companies to do business? Where does it just not make sense? Is that a piece of kind of being, of extending the business? You talked about kind of the survival rate of the business, or the longevity is the way you put it. Is that a piece of increasing that longevity, Sean?
I guess I'd frame it a slightly different way. I mean, or maybe respond in a slightly different way than you were expecting I would. I would look at what matters most to their customers, and try to align their internal capabilities to their external environment, to the jobs that their customers need to be done, and focus on that as really at its core, right? And that's really the core of innovation, is deeply understanding your customers, deeply understanding your competencies and where those overlap, and then again reframing your customers' jobs to be done, for lack of a better descriptor. Although that's actually another framework, in ways that you can use to create new value for them. Because at the end of the day, that's what keeps your company in business.
Did anybody else hear Sean say, you need to hire a really good marketing company? That's what I heard.
That's exactly what I said.
Actually, Mike, I think if we could comment on it, the question that you're asking is so because it is a marketing question that you've asked, and you're talking about market strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and it's above the level of what maybe a manager who's concerned about innovation necessarily needs to deal with. Sean, you've drilled into the right spot. I think that they should be paying attention to their customer, to their clients, and start experimenting, right? Start experimenting to get to the right solution. I think come up with as many options as you have to to find the answer to the problems that the market creates, and put them out there simultaneously. Put them out there quickly, and put them out there in small increments, right? So don't go for the grand poobah solution. Just try incremental solutions one at a time.
All right, very good.
Or I'm sorry, multiple at a time. I apologize. Benny, I cut you off there. Go ahead.
Well, I'll just I'll throw a little counter in there just so that, because it'll help Mike feel better about himself.
Okay, very good.
Henry Ford.
Unless you're saying don't hire a marketing company, then I'm going to feel terrible.
Not at all. Well, no, what Henry Ford once said, that if I asked my clients what they wanted, they would ask for better buggy whips when he was inventing the car.
Okay.
Steve Jobs basically would always say that if I let my clients do everything, they'd have more buttons on the phone, or it wouldn't have been the clean design that he had when he designed the iPhone. And so part of it, I think I do agree with Sean in terms of, you have to pay attention to your clients, but also to, if you have belief or understand your what you're after, what you're looking to do, and you have the ability to really kind of drive deeply into that. I'll throw that as kind of a monkey wrench into the idea that it only should always be customer focused. Part of that would be actually going back to what you all originally had talked about, was listening to your employees. Part of what good corporate innovative strategy would be, listen to what your employees are saying. Maybe they're a little bit closer to the ground, and in some cases, maybe they have a better feel for the products than you do up in the ivory tower, if you will. And so part of what I'll say is, have a good balance in there, and knowing what's right for the company and knowing what's right for your clients, maybe kind of placed together.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that, but I think we're saying the same thing. When I said be customer focused, I wasn't implying that the customer is always right. So I have almost 2 decades of product management experience, and consistently, without fail, if you do what the customer tells you to do, they will reject your product or service outright. So it's understanding the why behind what they're asking for. It's about deep empathy, really, but it's also about really understanding what jobs it is that they're trying to accomplish. It's do they want a 3-inch drill bit, or do they want a 3-inch hole kind of a thing? That's the classic jobs to be done example. So I think we are saying the same thing.
Yeah, the risk in there is that somebody might perceive what you're saying as, don't listen to your clients. You just the root is get to the bottom of the problem. So it's assessment rather than if I think about innovation, often the innovations that I implement are internal, right? So it's within the operational environment. One of the methods that I have for getting that done, and maybe this is off course or not, Mike, you can just rein me in, but is sitting with somebody while they do their job. And if they go through and they say, well, this is what we're supposed to do, but really this is what we do, that right there is a very good opportunity for innovation, right? So whatever it is that the person that's doing the job, or Sean, I guess you've taken it out to the customer, whatever it is that they'd like to be doing, that's the right area to be researching. You've kind of hit gold in those cracks.
Right. I hear this. So thinking of it from a marketing perspective, people lie. When you do the surveys, they tell you, yeah, I'd pay a lot of money for that. No, we're going to pay a lot of money for that. And so what I think really what I'm hearing, if I sum all of this together, is you need to understand and really be, I don't want to say empathetic because I think that's the wrong word, but really understand your customers on a core level, but don't just take their word for it. Look at the job to be done. What is it that the problem they're trying to solve? And is there a better solution, which is kind of a Steve Jobs piece, but also look at your team and how they're doing things and just really think about things deeply and I think that is in total alignment with everything we do, honestly, as a company, my way, because it's really about understanding the job before you try and do it is what I'm hearing. So that said, Sean, you were going to comment, and then I'm gonna move on. Go ahead.
It's in a way, it's moving on also. But the thing that you brought up about people lie, there's a fantastic book on this, and it gets us into another topic that I think is core for us. Is the book is called Everybody Lies.
Good book.
And the book is the core of it is about how big data can actually support research that shows what people actually do, even when they say they're doing anything else.
That is until the data scientists lie, but that's a whole other conversation.
Well, that
I'm
is
sorry. I had to be a smart.
It's a matter of garbage in, garbage out. But where I want to go with that is to say that a core of innovation is actually data, and you need to be able to, as a manager, assess the maturity of your organization's digital readiness, right? So how much data do you have being fed to you? How much do you have at your disposal to make decisions? And so you can get around some of those everybody lies type problems, or people are lying to you with data on hand. If you don't have good data feeding you, then those should be your first points of innovation, is try to get data in hand.
Right. And the data. So one of the things we do as a company, and I'm not trying to just be all about us, but we ask them questions like what's important to you and all those things. And that's where the lying comes in. And really, if you're going to view in the data, it's not just the data of what people say. It's also really measuring behavior. If you're starting to look at this level of it and you're a middle market company, it's what are they doing? Because what they're doing is really going to tell you. And your example, Tom, then is people tell you, we're supposed to do it this way, but we do it this way because it's better. That's a behavior. That's what you want to be measuring. And that's hard to measure.
Yeah, attitudinal insights are much easier to come by. Like you look at Net Promoter Score, right? Which is I mean, every large organization uses NPS. And Fred Reichheld holds it up as the cure-all, like the single metric that you need, right? But the truth is that it's an attitudinal indicator. It's not a behavioral indicator. So every time I say I'm a 9 or a 10 on one of those things, do I run out and tell 3 people, right? No, I don't. I really don't.
Right. That's exactly right. Would you do that? It likely means how much you really want to please the person asking the question. Mm-hmm. And if you really want them to think you like them, you're going to put down a 9 or a 10 is probably what that really is. So sorry, my biased self there. All right. We've had a couple comments. I think Tom and his wife have a disagreement about the artwork behind him because somebody says that is good artwork. My guess is that she put that there and I know she's on a call. I'm just
that's Louis Joubert.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, all right. We'll have another conversation about that. Spath Plants Rule. And then if somebody comments that Everybody Lies is a great book. And then Colin, who's on our team, who knows Tom, says he's brutally honest. So there you go. So Colin, we can talk about that later. Anyways, beyond that, we're going to go into our next question. And we have skipped forward a little bit because we really answered the one that I had in mind. But everybody wants to know, if you're a leader and you're looking at, gosh, I need to have, right, what we've talked about is build a more innovative culture. How do we change our company to be more comfortable with these changes that are happening is really where this has gone. And the question you have to ask is, what's going to go wrong? So that said, Benny, I'm going to give you a shot. What do you see go wrong? You put innovations in all the time.
Yeah. And what's the biggest risk? Obviously, when it comes to me talking to my clients or just in general, we're afraid of failure, right? And so people are whatever move I make, whether it be with technology or just the idea of, somehow putting the best solution down for, I love Tom's example about the strips on the road there. So that, what's the worry there? But I think that, and I take a look at some of the innovators today and yesterday, it's just that, I think that if you can adopt culturally into the company, not to be afraid to take risks and, have a little bit of the risk-taking attitude built in, then we can kind of mitigate some of that. But in terms of just the initiatives and where do we go wrong, what have I done? And if for the whole thing, am I going to look bad to my company? Am I going to look bad to my clients? I think that maybe some of that ego-driven ideology behind making type of any innovative moves, maybe that's a little bit of a problem there. So, I mean, that's part of the things I encounter on a daily basis.
So if I hear you right, really, the worst thing you're seeing, other than obviously catastrophic, really big problems, is that you make a mistake and you have a little bit of mud on your face, or you don't look quite good. But the bigger thing would be not doing this because you're afraid to make a mistake, and therefore you're going to be stagnant. And if Sean is right, you're going to be gone in 5 years because of that. So,
right,
is that your position? Okay, all right, Tom, what do you think?
So what can go wrong? I think being inconsistent as a company is probably one of the biggest things that you can do wrong. If your messaging is inconsistent with your actions. So in order to be an innovative company, you really do need to embrace the idea that not all innovations are going to be successful. Some are going to fail. If you discipline failure, that is a counter argument. That's dissonant, right? I mean, somebody is not going to ever then take that chance again. The next time that you want them to be innovative, that's Not going to happen. A second thing that frequently goes wrong is there's not enough space given for people to express innovative ideas. So if you sat down and you had that conversation with the person that had said, listen, this is the way that we're supposed to do it, but this is the way we actually do it, that's the person that needs to be telling you the way that they're actually doing things. That's the first point of research. If you are not setting up, I mean, be as creative as you need to, but an email that's, innovations at whatever your URL is, or quarterly ideation sessions, or one-on-ones. I mean, just give some space. People, I think, often make that mistake. What is the mistake that they make? They hire somebody with innovation in their title and think that that's going to do the trick. A director of innovation, and then just say, go innovate, guy, or go innovate, girl. Like that's not the solution. You need to have an entire ecosystem that supports innovation, not just a role.
So what I'm hearing you say really is that it's the way they think about it, that it's something that you can just kind of hand off and get it done, that what it is a cultural shift in your organization to become comfortable with change and risk in a way that we previously haven't, shift and then begin to innovate, to shift and measure. And if you don't have that, then that's your mistake. And then, so therefore, it just kind of extrapolating into your example, if you have somebody that says, this is how we really do it, this is how we're supposed to do it, you failed in that regard, because your culture is not innovative. They're not going to tell you that it's better to do it this way, and you don't have the feedback going up, or it's just inefficient. But that's another, I like failure better.
Yeah. You've nailed it there, Mike.
Well, maybe. We'll see. All right. I know two really smart Seans. One is on this call. What do you say, Sean?
Unfortunately, I agree with everything Benny and Tom said. So that bums me out. But I have a couple of other things maybe. So I would add to that. I think there's two things, kind of maybe two sides of the same coin. One is, an often failure point is, insufficient rigor, right? So drinking your own Kool-Aid around a concept, an idea, and prematurely scaling it without having the right product market fit. I think that happens a lot. So that's a risk, and there are certainly ways to mitigate that. The other side of that coin, I think, is impatience with sort of your results, right? Assigning a KPI, revenue, target users, whatever, prematurely in the process, and such that your steering committee or leadership team, champions, whatever, they end up killing a potential growth area too soon, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're not at revenue within 1 quarter, right? So I've seen that happen as well, and I've experienced both of those things myself. So those both suck. And I think that there's a third component. Again, it's kind of a human component, and Tom was touching on this. I kind of look at it as like a balance of specialists and generalists, right? And the people doing the work of innovation. And I've been on this soapbox for a while, and I don't know if you and I spoke about it, Mike, but I feel like I've talked to everybody about it. We live in a world that is dominated by specialists, or where there's there's value in specialization, and yet all the research points to the fact that generalists tend to be more effective in wicked learning environments. And so innovation is by definition a wicked learning environment, right? It's not a tame learning environment. It's not, if you do the same thing over and over again, and you can modify your behavior to improve, that tends to be a tame learning environment. Chess, tennis, that kind of thing. So innovation really lends itself well to people that have a generalist skill set, that are, T-shaped, if you will. And I think what happens is organizations tend to think that, oh, the person with the deepest experience in this particular area is the one that should go innovate. And that's often absolutely the wrong thing to do.
For sure.
Can I add to that real quick or comment on that really quickly?
Yeah, go right ahead.
The thing that you mentioned about KPIs, Sean, I couldn't agree more. It's something that we deal with on our implementation. So again, as Mike mentioned at the top there, I work with clients to implement augmented and virtual reality. Understanding that we are asking somebody to put a computer on their face, like asking somebody to look like this in their daily job is something totally new. So success with that task is going to change over the course of time. Initial success is just put it on. So our first KPI, or rather to say that our KPIs actually change over time. We're not looking for our end KPIs at the beginning. Our first KPI is, are people picking it up?
Yeah.
And if we can prove that, then that's great. And we do that for 2 quarters or a quarter. And then we move on to, all right, what's our outcomes? What's the outcome of usage? The second comment I wanted to throw in was a moment ago, I was criticizing directors of innovation. And if that came across badly, I wanted to add to it that what I meant to say was, if all you're doing is hiring a director of innovation and expecting change, you're going to fail.
Totally.
Having a director of innovation in your organization is a fantastic idea.
With
also
the
work on culture, with an ecosystem
Yeah.
that they can function and be successful in.
You can't have one person that's the innovation girl or guy, right? It just doesn't. That's not what it's about. It doesn't work that way. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. So directors of innovation know that Tom Shimbu hates you.
That's right. I support you.
I used to be one. I apologize in advance.
Yeah, there you go. So you guys should have a call, and then you can yell at him. So I had a comment, and it's just gone now. That's okay. It's gone. Let's go shift. Any other big failure pieces? This is what it was. Is that for me? I think it's that we tend to think about projects as a society, if we're in business, with rose-colored glasses, meaning we think it's going to be great, it's all going to go well. That's where, and we want to sell that story because we're selling it internally, or we're selling it to clients, or clients are selling it to their teams. And so that's where a lot of this overestimation of, we're going to do the KPIs. We're working with a company that they went public, they have these huge KPIs, they're never going to reach them. It's going to be a real challenge. And so I think, well, they won't, not never is wrong, but I don't think they'll hit them on target, right? And so I think looking at that and then being really jaded rather than rose-colored in your estimations, like be jaded and then really slow it down, and you're still probably going to overestimate it for what it's worth. That's just my experience of me. So there you go. All right, so we are going to shift to our final question for the day. And so Tom said they can't do it because, by gosh, we need to be referring people to books and people because it's such a big topic. But and I'm going to challenge you guys to think about it. What is the first step? And it can't be read a book. From your perspective, what is one key first step for people thinking about this? All right, let's go. Sean, let's start with you.
I guess first step for me would be assuming you are in a traditional sort of hierarchical, top-down organization. You have to have support at the highest levels for that culture shift. If an innovation group is spun up over here somewhere, but the executive team or the board or whoever it is doesn't actually believe in it or doesn't care about it, it's going to fail. And if they say they believe it, but they don't actually support it, then it's probably going to fail. So you actually, I think you again, in a hierarchical organization, you really need support of the CEO and the leadership team to make those initiatives successful. And I think that's probably the first thing. And really it's a long-term commitment. It's not just, yes, we're going to do this and it's going to be awesome. It's, yes, we're going to do this and we recognize that this isn't something that we're going to do overnight, and this is a multi-year process.
All right, very good. Back to this idea that you need to be patient and really build the cultural change within your company and bring the whole company along, and the board needs to be a part of it. Makes a ton of sense. Tom, we'll shift to you. What's your one tip I gave you time to think since I said you can't mention a book, and I'm pretty sure that was your planning.
Oh
But you're
man,
up,
I'll tell you
sir.
what, I've got books all over the place to mention, like Nudge by Richard Thaler. But moving
failed
on
me
from that,
already.
yeah. Well, sorry.
No, go on.
Mine was largely along the lines of what Sean said. So I think I'm going to go on to my second. So there's a reason why, Mike, I think you invited three technologists to the call today. I think that the framing for today's call is probably, though innovation isn't always about technology, today's chat is probably drew people who understood that we are technologists talking about innovation. So with that in mind, I would say that my next stop after you've made an assessment of your culture in terms of its readiness for change is then make an assessment of your digital maturity. It is a much less profitable situation to try and be innovating if you are still using typewriters than it is if you're already have some IoT installed around your organization. So it gets back to that earlier comment about having data allows you to make better choices. Having business intelligence systems allows you to make more informed choices. So my kind of second step would be prepare yourself as best you can by understanding where you have information about your operations. That is, get as much data as you can compiled.
Totally fair. What I really heard, some of you know, some of you don't know. In a previous life, I was a therapist, and there was a saying: "Start where the client is." And I'm hearing you say, "Figure out where the heck you are before you start innovating," which is a big deal because if you don't have the right foundation, then you better build the foundation first.
That's right.
All right, Benny, you do this with companies.
Yeah.
Pressure's on, sir. What's your response? Where do people start?
Well, I think Sean and Tom really had some. I think they're exactly right. You start where Sean said, and then move forward with Tom. But I'll say that from an innovation perspective, what I would say is you really need to, when you're gathering that data, as Tom had indicated, I think you really need to involve the employees in the whole process too as well, because. From a top level perspective, is your idea of innovation really something? Is it a metric that you're aiming for that's going to be useful for one part of the company only? Is it something that maybe you can't see just because you're so far removed from that particular process? I think it's really more of expanding exactly what Tom had indicated, was that the more data that you can get and look internal and ask for feedback, not simply maybe just hiring an individual, an outsider to come on in and be able to say, what do you think needs to be done here, and then move with that. I think just add some clarity in terms of what you're looking at. So that's really kind of my thought.
So yeah, I'm hearing from you that it's not just bring your organization along, it's really involve them and get their assessment, which I think everybody probably was kind of in the back of their head, but you're saying that explicitly, which I appreciate.
Yeah. I think it's just adding one more layer to that. So that's great.
All right. Yeah, very good. Okay, that is our last question. Thank you very much, panel. I'm going to switch over really quick and do a commercial for next week's LinkedIn Live. And that is we are going to have a panel discussion on data security. Again, we're trying to bring broad variety of perspectives. And we will have, I believe, an IT company leader, a data security leader, and then somebody that sells software that goes into that industry. So it's going to be really a great conversation. I hope you can make it. That'll be a week from today at noon Mountain, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Thank you again, panel. We're gonna leave it there. You guys have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thanks, guys.
All right.